Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for March 8th, 2018. On today's show, we're going to dive into a bunch of news, including Jon Favreau's Star Wars TV series, Terminator casting, Netflix's other superhero cinematic universe, the Joker movie, a Sopranos prequel, Defenders, Fox Searchlight, and Ready Player One box office tracking. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and I am joined today by Slash Film Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And writers Hoai-Tran Bui.
Hey, everyone.
And Chris, Evangelista.
Hello.
Now, I'm debating something, guys. Like, every episode of Slash Film Daily, I open it up and I give you a rundown of what we're going to talk about on the episode. But we've read about this in the show notes. I don't know. I feel like my, reading off a list of things that we're running about might not be helping people. So I'm wondering what you guys out there think. If you could please email me at peter@slashfilm.com. Does this help you? Does this not help you? Should we be doing something different there? What do you guys think? Because I haven't actually asked you.
Do you guys have thoughts?
I don't think it hurts. I mean, I don't have a problem with it.
I think it's fine, too. I think it's kind of like a title menu at the beginning. If you stick around for these news bits.
Yeah, a table of contents kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we've always done it because that's what other podcasts do, is they, tell you what's going to be on that episode. But I just, I don't know, I almost feel like it spoils some of these news items. But okay, maybe I'm in the minority.
Can we spoil news items?
I'm sure listeners and readers think so. So, yes. Anyways, today has been one of the biggest news days in months. We have, Star Wars news, Marvel news, a bunch of different comic book properties, DC news, Terminator news. It has been nonstop. So much so that we had at least 4 other items we were going to cover on this news program that we had to cut off the schedule because we just aren't going to have time. So let's just dive into this. Jon Favreau has been announced as the writer and producer of a new live-action Star Wars TV series for Disney's streaming service. Ben, what do we know?
Yeah, so Kathleen Kennedy announced on StarWars.com earlier this morning that Jon Favreau has been hired. She said, "I couldn't be more excited about Jon coming on board to produce and write for the new direct-to-consumer platform. Jon brings the perfect mix of producing and writing talent combined with a fluency in the Star Wars universe. This series will allow Jon the chance to work with a diverse group of writers and directors to give Lucasfilm the opportunity to build a robust talent base." So Favreau, to me, seems like a pretty good fit for the Star Wars universe. It's interesting that he's going to be working on the TV side instead of the film side. But yet again, we have to say that this is another straight white guy that Lucasfilm is hiring in a key position of power here. And much has been made of the fact that today is International Women's Day, and this announcement came out on that day, and it's another, white guy in a position of power. It's not exactly the best messaging from Lucasfilm again.
Oh, and we should quantify that, we don't know why this announcement was made today. Personally, I have known about this for over a month, that Favreau was directing this. Couldn't report it because of reasons. So it's been something that's been in the works. So why announce it today on International Women's Day? It could be possibly that, a trade site like Deadline contacted Disney and was we're working on the story. And then they basically had to announce it before, it was announced through other channels. So that there is that possibility, and we should acknowledge that.
Yeah, for sure. And, Kennedy did say the series will allow Jon the chance to work with a diverse group of writers and directors. So she sort of, I feel like they know that the general sentiment about Lucasfilm's recent hiring practices is sort of tipping against them in at least in the Twitter sphere and our, film writing, blogging circles. So I think they have to be aware of what this looks like from the outside looking in. But maybe Favreau just overseeing this, maybe he has a bunch of people picked already, in mind to step into showrunner. I mean, he's essentially going to be the showrunner, but to step into writing and directing positions on this new show, we just don't know. It's too early. But still, the point stands that it's another white guy in, making key decisions in the Star Wars universe. And it's as much as I like Favreau as a filmmaker and think that he is a good fit for this universe, it's still a little disheartening to see them sort of just go back to that same well over and over again.
Let's wait and see. Let's see who's directing, who's writing, who's the other producers. Let's see, who is starring in. We do know that Jon Favreau is a huge Star Wars fan. Way back when Disney bought Lucasfilm, he was one of the directors rumored to be in talks for either Episode 7 or a Star Wars standalone film. That obviously did not happen. I remember I was on the set of Jungle Book in downtown Los Angeles, and they shot that on these warehouse stages, much like I think they're probably doing with The Lion King. And all around the warehouse they had blue screens, and I asked him, why did you choose blue over green? Is there some kind of technical reason? And he was like, no, there's really no technical reason. It's just that I remember growing up looking at all the behind-the-scenes Star Wars images, and they always had blue screens. Now it's all green. So I just wanted to feel like I was on a set of a Star Wars movie. So I thought that was kind of
sweet. Yeah,
sweet. I'm wondering, what do you guys think of this beyond, obviously what Ben said about, it not being a more diverse choice. HC, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Jon Favreau is actually really uniquely suited towards the Star Wars franchise just because he has proven to be really skilled with making films that are centered around visual effects and motion capture, like Jungle Book and the upcoming Lion King. So it seems that would be suited towards a Star Wars TV series. I think it's a series, right? Yes, yeah. A live-action Star Wars series. But yeah, I'm kind of ambivalent towards the fact that it's another white, straight male creator that Disney is choosing, and then the fact that they're sort of touting that they have a really diverse crew, and yet their record doesn't quite show to match that.
Let's wait and see. I'm giving them a wait and see attitude at this point. But you do bring up a good point. When George Lucas was making when he had announced he was going to make a live action Star Wars TV show, it was going to be set in the underworld. And at the time it was rumored that he was basically waiting for technology to catch up, that he wanted to do virtual environments, kind of like Avatar or I guess Jungle Book, motion capture characters, and he wanted to push TV to a place that had never been before. I'm wondering, obviously this is probably not going to be the TV series that George Lucas had envisioned, but I'm wondering if, they're trying to do a similar thing here where, they're calling it a live action TV series, but I'm wondering if, half of it's actually going to be, visualized, through computers. Chris, do you have any thoughts on Favreau as the head of the Star Wars TV series?
I mean, I agree with what everyone has said already about this. I also think it's a very safe choice. I mean, I don't have anything against Jon Favreau, but he's not someone I would consider a quote unquote great filmmaker. I think he's a good filmmaker. He knows what he's doing. It's not a type of announcement that gets me particularly excited, but it's not. I don't think it's a terrible thing either. I'm somewhere in the middle. Let's put it like that.
My problem is I love Jon Favreau's little films. I love Maid. I love Chef, and I feel like I was talking with a friend, and he said that kind of much in the way that Rian Johnson is getting sucked into Star Wars, and we're not going to get Loopers and Bricks and Brothers Blooms. I feel like, we're not going to get another Chef because he's going to be busy in a galaxy far, far away. So that's, but it seems like Favreau wants to do bigger stuff. He doesn't want to do those smaller, more intimate character pieces. It should also be mentioned that Favreau has done some time with some TV in the past. He, what was the MTV show that he just produced? It was a sci-fi series.
The Chronicles of something.
Yes, the
great stuff.
Sonora Chronicles.
Yes, yeah, you're right.
And he also was a co-executive producer and director of the first episode of the Bad Robot TV show Revolution. I saw Revolution, was not impressed with that. I know a lot of people like the Sonora Chronicles. I have not seen that. But Ben, do you have any additional thoughts?
I guess speaking of Favreau's TV credits, we should also mention that he was part of the show called Dinner for Five, which was basically him and a bunch of guest celebrities sitting around eating, drinking, and talking about life on TV. That is obviously going to be totally different, stylistic, and basically in every way imaginable.
And by the way, that show's amazing. If you have never seen Dinner for Five, I'm sure someone probably pirated it and put it on YouTube. Not that I'm recommending that's how you watch it, but you should go watch it. It still holds up.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see what he does with a TV show. And yeah, I think, Peter, you bring up a good point. I feel like this very well could be something where a majority of this show ends up being motion capture or, heavily reliant on VFX, because that's what he seems to be passionate about these days. So we'll have to see.
So we spent 10 minutes on one story. We're totally not going to go over our time limit today. But let's move on to our next story, which is the new Terminator sequel coming from the director of Deadpool, and James Cameron has cast their star. HT, what do we know?
Well, cast one of their stars. So Mackenzie Davis from Blade Runner 2049 and The Martian, as well as the hit AMC show *Halt and Catch Fire*, is in negotiations to join the cast of the Terminator sequel, which also will see the return of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton in their iconic roles. So she is playing a key role, not the star role of the new sequel, but a role as a soldier assassin on a mission, according to The Hollywood Reporter. So she's going to play a human character in a movie that once again sets up the battle between woman or man and machine. So she has been frequently seen in a lot of sci-fi recently. She was in Blade Runner 2049, as I said before, and she was also in the critically acclaimed Black Mirror episode San Junipero. So she really seems to like roles that kind of rest on the edge of humanity and technology. So she will be in the sequel that's untitled so far, and it will be a direct sequel to Terminator 2 Judgment Day, from director Tim Miller, like you said before, and producers James Cameron and David Ellison.
So we don't really know anything about this movie thus far. We do know that this is going to be a sequel. It's going to take into canon what? Terminator 1 and 2, not 3?
Yes, only Terminator 1 and 2, and it's going to ignore 3, Salvation, and Genesis, wisely for Salvation and Genesis. So it's a sort of reboot in a way.
If we're going to have Linda Hamilton in this movie, where does she fit? Is she going to be a Terminator or a human? Ben, what are your thoughts?
Oh, man, I did not really consider that, but that's sort of a fascinating notion. They have definitely done female Terminators before. That was a big thing with Christiana Loken in Terminator 3. But no, I think Linda Hamilton's probably going to be the badass Linda Hamilton that we saw in Terminator 2, just even older and possibly more badass, because I think that was a big thing that James Cameron was talking about when that announcement first came out, was that there aren't really strong female roles in the way that, or in the vein of Linda Hamilton in T2 in modern cinema. And I think that's something that he wants to see returned to the big screen, and is going to be excited about bringing that kind of character back. So I can't imagine that he would flip things so dramatically that she would end up being the villain in this. But I don't know. That is kind of compelling. I really don't know, Peter.
Okay, there's been, 3 Terminator films in a row that audiences have not responded for. We have some good people involved here. Chris, are you going to be excited about the first Terminator film from James Cameron in, decades?
I mean, if he was directing it, I might be excited, but he's not. So, no, I feel like this is a franchise that really needs to die. I mean, there really hasn't been a great Terminator movie since the second one. I mean, I think the third one is watchable, but beyond that, they've all been really bad. I don't think there's any way to really redeem this franchise at this point.
It needs to be terminated, you might say.
Oh, I wish I had thought of that.
Don't worry, guys. It'll be back. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's move on. We were mentioning the movie is being directed by the director of Deadpool 1. Well, Deadpool creator Rob Liefeld has landed his superhero cinematic universe in a deal with Netflix. Chris, you wrote this up for the site. What do we know?
Yeah, so Rob, is it Liefeld or Liefeld? I'll say Liefeld.
I think it's Liefeld.
Okay, Rob Liefeld, he has something called the Extreme Universe, which I don't really know much about, but he's signed a very big deal with Netflix to create a series of interconnected films. And our old friend Akiva Goldsman is going to be running a writer's room to set up these films.
Is he our old friend just like Movie Pass is our old friend?
Yeah, everybody loves Akiva Goldsman. He's everyone's favorite writer. Netflix is basically, they're getting into the superhero cinematic universe game, just like, Marvel and, DC to a lesser extent. They're trying to create their own cinematic universe now. So there you go.
Now, I know you haven't read any of these Extreme titles, and if you can tell by the title of his imprint, it was something that came up in like the 90s, right? What can you tell us about Extreme?
I can tell you literally nothing about it. There are characters named Bloodstrike, Blood Wolf, a lot of blood in the titles. Kaboom! I can't wait for the Kaboom movie, personally.
I'm just wondering, with Netflix buying up all these kind of superhero cinematic universes, that obviously they purchased Millar World. Like, I'm wondering if someday Netflix is going to be able to do what we are not able to see on the big screen, where we're going to see, obviously in comics we've seen like DC versus Marvel like crossovers, but that's never going to happen on the big screen. Maybe we'll actually see that on Netflix. No,
it's definitely possible. I don't see why not. I mean, I guess we'll see, especially because I feel like with this, especially with this title, there's a lot less like rights issues because they're all coming from this one creator, so it might be a lot easier to have that crossover potential.
It's also interesting to see how kind of interested Netflix is in creators. They're very creator driven, signing deals with, filmmakers, or like getting Mark Millar's whole catalog or Rob Liefeld's whole catalog. It makes me wonder, Shonda Rhimes, and we've talked about all those showrunners and filmmakers in the past. I just wonder, where they're headed, because at some point they're gonna own us all.
Yeah, it's pretty much going to be Netflix and Disney is the future, and that's it. And then we'll all belong to them in some capacity.
Well, we talked on this podcast about how Disney is doing their own streaming service, and how the Marvel movies are no longer going to be on Netflix after that happens. What does that say for the chances of the future of the Defenders TV series, Chris?
The Defender, we will probably not get a Defenders season 2. Kristen Ritter, she's doing promotion right now for Jessica Jones season 2, which is now available on Netflix. And she was asked, will there be a Defenders 2? And she said, I had a great time doing Defenders. It's such a good experience and so on. But she says, I don't think we are doing it again. And honestly, I'm not surprised, because I personally don't remember anyone being very excited about the Defenders. I feel like people still get excited about the one-offs, Daredevil and so on, but there was almost no real hype about Defenders after it came out. And I understand why, because it was not very good.
And we really don't know for sure what the future of Disney's streaming service means for these Marvel TV series. Chris, is there the potential that, like, after 2019 comes along, that we won't get further seasons of these shows?
It's still up in the air. I'm sure we'll know more once they finalize everything. Marvel and Disney have been sort of wishy-washy about the whole thing. At first they said, they're definitely going to stay on there. Then they said they're not sure. They're going back and forth. I'm sure we'll know sooner or later. I wouldn't be surprised if Netflix keeps what they have now, but anything new, like any new Marvel superhero series, goes to the Disney streaming service.
Yeah, we do know for sure that Netflix owns all the seasons that they have produced thus far, so those will be on there for the future, unless Netflix decides to take them off just because Disney's their competition and why have a show. But I don't think they would do that. But let's move on to another bit of news. Let's go from Marvel to DC. We've been talking about Todd Phillips' Joker origin movie. We now know what Joker's origin is going to be. Ben, you wrote up for the site. What do we know?
Yeah, so just to lay the groundwork again for people who may not have been tracking this, the Hangover director Todd Phillips is directing a movie about the origin story of the Joker, and this film is being written by Scott Silver, who wrote 8 Mile, and it's being executive produced by Martin Scorsese, and that is such a freaking weird combination of people for this particular project. But now a new report says that the origin of the Joker is in this film is essentially going to be the same as the origin of the Joker in the famous 1988 comic Batman: The Killing Joke. And that is a famous comic that's by Alan Moore and artist Brian Boland. And essentially, it means that the Wrap reported this, and their quote is, "The Untitled Joker origin movie will portray Batman's arch nemesis as a failed 1980s comedian." And then he basically develops the Joker persona after bombing with audiences. So that's basically straight out of The Killing Joke, that comic storyline there. And that's one of a few different nebulous origin stories that have been sort of woven through the comics, because there isn't a true origin story for the Joker that's part of the allure of the character. But obviously, for a movie that's being set in the 1980s and it's all about the origin of the Joker, they have to pick something. And it's not surprising to me at all that they would go with this stand-up comedy angle, because The Killing Joke is such a famous, iconic comic. And Zack Snyder has always been a filmmaker who has loved recreating these really iconic moments from famous comic books. And it seems like, even though he's not directing this film or even involved with it in the least, as far as we can tell, it seems like his influence on the DC movies has basically infected this project as well, where they're basically I guess it's a way for them to differentiate between DC and Marvel, right? Because Marvel has made a lot of decisions about, okay, we're going to do Civil War, but it's not exactly going to be Civil War like you know it from the comics. It's going to be a movie version of Civil War that sort of is tweaked to fit what they need it to fit. But DC has been much more literalist, if that's even a word, with their adaptations, Batman versus Superman and all of that stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot there to unpack. But yeah, basically, the Joker is going to be a failed stand-up comedian.
That is an interesting take. I like that comic. I know some DC fans like the kind of connection with Batman. I know my friend and listener, John Armstrong, has said to me that to him it's important that in some way Batman's actions created the Joker, either indirectly, like in The Dark Knight, or directly, like Batman 89, that the Joker is Chaos's answer to the order that Batman tried to bring to Gotham. So I'm interested to see, how this works out, and also with Matt Reeves doing his own movie, his own Batman movie. I'm wondering, will this be connected in any way? We have been told this is a standalone movie, but I don't know.
Yeah, and also I just wanted to mention too that the report says that Martin Scorsese's involvement with this project now makes a little bit more sense, because Scorsese directed The King of Comedy, which is a 1983 movie that starred Robert De Niro as like a delusional comedian. And apparently the Joker origin movie, quote, will include nods to The King of Comedy. And I don't really know exactly what that means, but it seems very obvious to me. Like, I don't know. It's like if somebody was making a movie about an action-centric archaeologist, and they get Steven Spielberg to produce it, like, it just seems like such a strange thing for them to be like, oh yeah, we'll get Scorsese because he knows about this. And it seems like a weird thing that Scorsese would want to be involved in, It's
also a gangster movie, so I mean, he does have, I don't know, I mean, I see where you're coming from, and he hasn't done much of that in the past. We'll have to see how it turns out. But let's move on. Talking about gangsters, the Sopranos prequel movie is in the works from series creator David Chase. This is very surprising. I mean, today has been filled with some big news stories. HT, why are they doing a Sopranos prequel?
So David Chase is writing the screenplay for Sopranos Prequel film that will be titled The Many Saints of Newark. That's the current working title of this prequel movie that will take place in 1960s New Jersey. So it's a screenplay that has recently been purchased by New Line and is currently searching for a director. And Chase co-wrote the screenplay with Sopranos co-writer Lawrence Connor. So that's it seems like a little out of the blue because it's been more than 10 years now since The Sopranos first went off the air, but David Chase has sort of been itching to come back to the acclaimed HBO series that has been deemed one of the best TV shows of all time, and I feel like this is probably the best way to do that since his main star, James Gandolfini, has passed away, and now he can delve into the sort of Sopranos Italian mobster empire that has been built up in New Jersey since the 1960s. And it has the addition, too, of having the tensions of the race riots that took place at that time as well.
It just seems so strange because, that series kind of ended in a way, and the interviews David Chase has done have been kind of like, that's it. Chris, I assume you are a fan of The Sopranos. What do you think of this news?
I'm excited about this. I love The Sopranos. I'm oddly not cynical about this at all for some reason. Normally I get cynical. I know, believe it or not.
It's a prequel, so it feels like it could go into a completely different direction.
Yeah, I feel like if it was like a sequel and if David Chase wasn't involved, I'd be like, forget this. But the fact that it's him doing it, it's a prequel, it's a completely different story. I don't know. I'm excited. I love The Sopranos. I'm all for exploring the world that show created even more. So I'm looking forward to this.
Ben, will you watch The Sopranos movie?
I probably will eventually, but I'm going to have to watch all of The Sopranos first because I've never seen an episode of that show.
That's crazy. I hate to ask, but HT, have you seen The Sopranos?
I actually have.
Oh, wow.
I've only watched the first 2 seasons, actually, because my roommate in college is obsessed with the series, and we sat down to watch it for a while together, but we both got busy. But I really like it. It's a great series, and it's one of those, like, I'll finish it eventually because I know it's an important show, but I only watched the first 2 seasons so far.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see what comes of this. Let's move on to Ready Player One. The box office tracking for Steven Spielberg's latest film is falling short of expectations. Chris, what do we know?
Yeah, so Warner Brothers had been hoping for at least a $50 million opening weekend, but right now projections indicate Ready Player One will be only getting around, I say only in quotes because I'd be fine with this, but it's only going to get around 35 million. So not what they were hoping for. I feel like everyone was sort of hoping that this would be Steven Spielberg's big return to blockbusters because his last few movies, which I think are great, they're great movies, but they're not, big blockbuster films. And this has that, that sci-fi angle, that special effects angle, but it's apparently not doing the trick.
I'm kind of surprised. I mean, I'm not excited by these trailers for Ready Player One, but the source material sounds promising. I haven't read the book, and Steven Spielberg back in the blockbuster game. But everybody keeps on kind of crapping on these these posters we posted recently. It seems like everybody's taking a dump on how much this movie is kind of trying to relate itself with nostalgia. HT, what are your thoughts? Why are people not excited for Ready Player One?
Well, I actually read the book. I read the entire thing, too. I didn't drop it. And while it has a really interesting premise, it's a pretty bad book. It skates by on tapping into the best nostalgia of the 1980s, and lots of pages just end up being entire lists and feeling like it's just reading a Wikipedia page of remember the 1980s. So it's not a great source material, I don't think, and it also taps dangerously into a lot of ideas of toxic masculinity without quite addressing it properly. So I am a little nervous about the movie. I really love Steven Spielberg and I trust him, but I don't know if I can trust him to elevate a book like this to a movie that's actually good.
We'll have to see how it turns out. Judging by these TV advertisements and the marketing, I'm worried. But let's get into our last bit of news, and that is at the Oscars, Shape of Water took home like the biggest honors. Fox Searchlight, which is the company that produced the Guillermo del Toro film. Many people are wondering, now that Fox is being acquired by Disney, how is that going to affect this prestigious mini major studio, this art house division of Fox Searchlight? Ben, what do we know?
Yeah, so in a company conference call with shareholders, Walt Disney CEO Bob Iger said today that, quote, "We don't have any plans right now to change what they do. We have every intention to maintain the business of Fox Searchlight. We think they're in the business of making high-quality films. We think there's ample opportunity for us as a company to support those efforts." So that's good news for people who are worried about what Fox Searchlight might get morphed into under the Mouse House's control once that acquisition actually gets approved, or assuming that acquisition actually gets approved. For me, this sort of raises the question of, is Disney interested in awards now? Because under Bob Iger's reign, the studio has basically defined themselves with their acquisitions. You've got Pixar and Lucasfilm and Marvel and now Disney, or Fox, excuse me. So the studio has basically just been hyper focused on creating these brands and pushing forward these Disney brands, but they have not really been the kind of studio that has seemingly cared about going after Best Picture trophies and things like that. So if they keep Fox Searchlight operating as it currently is under the Disney name, that seems like a good opportunity for them to potentially score some bragging rights, against their peers in the industry, if they were to essentially dominate the blockbuster landscape, but also have some awards-friendly Best Picture contenders in the years to come.
That is interesting. I mean, obviously, Disney has gone for awards in the animation category. Disney and Pixar always, trying to do the short animation award. They've cleared house in that department. But I don't know. Part of me wonders, would a film like Shape of Water, which has a woman having sex with a fish man, happen under the reign of Disney? HT. Do you think they're still going to make movies like that?
That's a good question. I feel like they've primarily let Pixar sort of be a studio on their own, but we've seen some changes within Marvel. Nothing drastic, but it feels like, Marvel, since coming under Disney, has definitely marketed more heavily towards family and family-friendly fare. We don't see scenes like the stripper scenes that we saw in Iron Man. So I wonder if they'll, start start interfering in more critically acclaimed, more like mature fare that we see with Fox. But yeah, I don't know. I can't really say.
It's also interesting because I feel like if you jump back in time like 10 years, and you looked at Fox Searchlight, I feel like it would have been a no-brainer for them to be part of Disney. They were making accessible indie movies like Little Miss Sunshine, Juno. You know what I mean? Like, and then since then they kind of started to try to chase the awards, and they got more like into those kind of films, like Shame or Shape of Water, which I feel like wouldn't be Disney films. So I'm interested to see what happens to Fox Searchlight, if and when this deal does go through. But we have gone slightly over in this podcast, but I'm proud of us guys because we got through a lot of big stories in a relatively short amount of time. Yay us! Pat yourselves on the back. Chris, where can people find more of your work online?
I'm at slashfilm.com, and I'm on Twitter at Evangelista413.
HT, where can people find you?
You can also find me at slashfilm.com, and I'm on Twitter at Hoai-Tran Bui.
Ben, where can you be found?
Surprise, surprise, slashfilm.com, and you can track me down on Twitter at Ben Pears.
You can find me at slashfilm on Twitter. You can find all the stories we talked about today linked in the show notes and on slashfilm.com. This podcast, Slash Film Daily, is published every weekday on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, /film.com, all your popular podcast apps. Please go rate and review this podcast on iTunes. That helps us out quite a bit. Spread the word. Tell your friends about the podcast, and we will see you tomorrow.